Groom badmouthed the bride in Arabic, just for his friend to understand. But the mother-in-law spoke 8 languages. Jessica Wilson was living the most dreamed-of day of her life, adjusting the delicate veil of the wedding dress she had chosen months earlier. At 28, she was finally marrying Rashid Malik, the man she had met 2 years ago and who had promised to be her companion for life. That's when she heard laughter coming from the hallway leading to the altar. Through the slightly open door of the bride's room, Jessica saw Rashid talking animatedly in Arabic with his best man, Faisal, not imagining that Margaret Wilson, her 62-year-old mother and a retired linguistics professor, understood every word coming out of his mouth. "She really believes I love her," Rashid said in Arabic, letting out a laugh. "She's so naive she doesn't even realize I'm only here for the inheritance from her sick father." Margaret felt her heart race as she continued to listen, pretending to arrange the flowers on Jessica's bouquet. Her grey hair trembled slightly when Rashid continued speaking. "This stupid American woman is easy to manipulate. When the old man passes, I'll have everything in my hands. The house, the business, the savings. Then I can get rid of her and go back home." Faisal laughed softly, also responding in Arabic. "You're brilliant, my friend. She doesn't suspect a thing. But what if someone finds out?" "Who's going to find out?" Rashid shrugged. "These Americans barely speak proper English, let alone Arabic. I'm safe." Margaret had to lean against the wall to keep from staggering. 40 years as a linguistics professor at the University of California hadn't been in vain. She spoke 8 languages, including Arabic, which she had learned during her studies of Semitic languages. But she never imagined this knowledge would be used in such a devastating situation. Jessica appeared in the mirror, radiant in her simple but elegant dress, the veil falling delicately over her tan shoulders. Her brown eyes shone with happiness. "Mum, you haven't said anything about how I look. What do you think?" Margaret forced a smile, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "You look beautiful, my dear. The most beautiful bride I've ever seen." But inside, her world was collapsing. How could she destroy her daughter's happiness just minutes before the ceremony? Jessica had dreamed of this day since she was little. She had worked as a nurse for years to save up for her dream wedding. She had even sold her car to pay for the dress and the party. "Are you okay, Mom? You look pale," Jessica noticed, touching her mother's face gently. "Just the emotion, sweetheart. It's normal." Outside, Rashid continued his cruel conversation. "The best part is, she works so much she won't even notice when I start transferring things. Nurses make peanuts anyway. When I marry a real woman, I'll already have a good financial base." Margaret clenched her fists. That man wasn't just deceiving Jessica for money, but was humiliating her in every possible way. And she was there, powerless, watching her daughter prepare to give her life to a liar. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Jessica approached the window, watching the guests arriving at the small banquet hall they had rented in downtown Santa Monica. It was a simple ceremony, but full of love. At least that's what she thought. "Look how many people came, Mum. Even Mrs. Jenkins from the building managed to come, even with her leg problem." Margaret looked out the window and saw Richard, Jessica's father, talking with some relatives near the makeshift altar. At 65, he was visibly weakened by the diabetes that had accompanied him for 5 years, but he had insisted on walking his daughter down the aisle. Her completely white hair was carefully styled, and the navy blue suit, though old, was impeccable. "Your father is so proud," murmured Margaret, feeling a pang in her chest. If Rashid was interested in the inheritance, it meant he knew about Richard's health problems. Had he investigated the family before getting close to Jessica? The door opened and Emily, Jessica's younger sister, came running in. At 25, she was a younger version of the bride, with the same curly brown hair and expressive eyes. "Jessica, you need to see something," said Emily, looking troubled. "What is it, Em?" "I'm almost ready to walk down the aisle." "It's about Rashid. I was trying to help with the rings when I heard him talking to Faisal in a strange language. They seemed to be laughing about something serious." Margaret felt her blood run cold. Emily had noticed something too. "What nonsense, Emily," Jessica laughed nervously. "Rashid was probably telling some joke from his homeland. You know how men get nervous at weddings." "But Jessica, there was something strange about his manner. And when they saw me, they stopped talking immediately." Margaret knew she needed to make a decision. Revealing the truth now would destroy Jessica, but letting the wedding happen would be even worse. She took a deep breath and decided she needed more evidence before acting. "Emily, help me here with your sister's veil, and let's stop looking for trouble where there isn't any, okay?" But Margaret was already formulating a plan. She needed to find out more about Rashid's true intentions before destroying her daughter's dreams. During the ceremony, she would pay attention to every detail, every conversation, every glance. 15 minutes later, the music began to play. Jessica took Richard's arm, who smiled with difficulty, clearly making an effort to hide his fatigue. Margaret followed them, carrying a huge weight in her heart. The hall was decorated with simple white flowers and some candles. The approximately 50 guests turned to see the bride enter. Rashid looked elegant in his black suit, smiling in a way that seemed genuine. Beside him, Faisal watched everything with a neutral expression. Margaret noticed there were some guests she didn't know, people who seemed to be from Rashid's family or Arabic friends. She decided she needed to approach them during the reception. While the priest spoke about love and commitment, Margaret watched Rashid closely. He played the part of the passionate groom well, holding Jessica's hands tenderly, looking into her eyes with supposed devotion. But now that she knew the truth, she could see small details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way his eyes shifted when the priest spoke about fidelity, how he pressed his lips together when they mentioned the responsibilities of marriage. "Rashid Malik, do you take Jessica Wilson to be your wife, to love and respect her in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, until life do you part?" asked the priest. "Yes, I do," replied Rashid, with a firm voice that felt like a dagger in Margaret's heart. When it was Jessica's turn, her voice trembled with emotion. "Yes, I do, with all my heart." The rings were exchanged. Rashid kissed Jessica to the applause of the guests. Margaret forced a smile and applauded too, but inside she was falling apart. During the reception, Margaret circulated among the guests, paying special attention to Rashid's Arabic friends. She approached a group and discreetly began to listen to their conversations. "How do you know each other?" she asked a lady of about 50, who had been introduced as Rashid's aunt. "We're family from Cairo," the woman replied in heavily accented English. "Rashid is a good boy, works very hard." "And what does he do in Egypt?" Margaret insisted. The woman hesitated before answering. "He works in business." Margaret noticed the discomfort and decided to test the waters. "It must be hard being away from your family. I imagine you speak a lot of Arabic to ease the homesickness." "Yes, of course," the woman quickly agreed. It was then that Margaret decided to take the next step. She addressed the woman in perfect Arabic. "It's truly a shame that he has to be away from home for so long." The reaction was immediate. The woman paled and began to stammer, clearly not expecting anyone at the party to speak Arabic. Other members of the group looked uncomfortable. You speak Arabic?" asked the woman, still in shock. "I speak 8 languages," Margaret replied, still in Arabic. "And I heard some very interesting things today." The group fell into absolute silence. Margaret knew she had hit the mark. These people knew exactly what Omar's true intentions were. At that moment, Faisal approached the group looking nervous. "Is everything all right here?" "Your friend here speaks Arabic," said Omar's aunt, clearly concerned. Faisal instantly paled. Margaret looked directly at him. "Yes, and I heard some very enlightening things today." Faisal tried to play it off, forcing a smile. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm sure you do," Margaret replied, now alternating between English and Arabic. "Especially about inheritances and naive American women." Faisal took a step back, clearly panicking. At that moment, Omar approached, probably sensing that something was wrong. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking nervously at the group. "Your mother-in-law speaks Arabic," Faisal said quietly, still in English. Omar felt the blood drain from his face. He looked at Margaret as if he'd seen a ghost. Is that true?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure. Perfectly true, Margaret replied in flawless Arabic, and I heard every word of your conversation before the ceremony. Omar staggered slightly. Faisal ran his hand through his hair, clearly growing desperate. Mrs. Margaret, I can explain, Omar began, switching back to English. Explain what? How you plan to rob my family? How you were planning to get rid of my daughter after taking our inheritance? Margaret's voice was controlled, but there was fire in her eyes. At that moment, Jessica approached the group, smiling and holding up her dress to avoid tripping. Mom, what are you all talking about here? Are you getting to know Omar's family? The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone looked at Jessica with expressions of discomfort. Omar desperately tried to regain control of the situation. We were just talking about family traditions. How nice. Jessica smiled genuinely. Mom, you never told me you knew how to speak Arabic. Margaret looked at her daughter, so radiant in her wedding dress, and felt her heart break. But she knew she had to protect her, no matter how much it hurt. Jessica, honey, we need to talk. Now? But Mom, it's my wedding reception. That's exactly why we need to talk. Now. Omar grew desperate. Jessica, love, your mother must be confused about something. How about we go cut the cake first? I'm not confused, Omar, Margaret said, pronouncing his name sharply. I'm completely clear about what I heard you say about my daughter an hour ago. Jessica looked between her mother and her husband, beginning to sense that something serious was happening. What's going on here? Can someone explain? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. It was at that moment that Richard approached the group, leaning on his cane. Despite his age and illness, his eyes were still sharp. Margaret, is everything all right? I saw you talking here and you seemed tense. Richard, please sit down, said Margaret, pulling a chair. We have a serious situation to resolve. Jessica was growing increasingly worried. You guys, you're scaring me. What's going on? Rashid tried once more to take control. Jessica, honey, I think your mother misunderstood something. I didn't misunderstand anything, Margaret cut in, her voice firm, and I'll prove it right now. Margaret then turned to Rashid and in perfect Arabic repeated exactly the words he had said before the ceremony. She actually believes I love her. She's so naive she doesn't even realize I'm only here for the inheritance from her sick father-in-law. This stupid American woman is easy to manipulate. The effect was devastating. Rashid turned white as a sheet. Faisal took another step back. Rashid's aunt covered her mouth with her hands, horrified. Jessica looked at Rashid, then at her mother, trying to process what she had just heard. Mom, what did you just say? I translated what your husband said about you to Faisal before the ceremony, my daughter. Jessica felt her legs weaken. Richard rose from his chair, leaning on his cane, with an expression of fury nobody had seen on him in years. Repeat that in English, he ordered Rashid, his voice trembling with anger. Rashid tried to deny. Mr. Richard, this is a misunderstanding. Your wife must have heard wrong. My wife was a linguistics professor for 40 years and speaks 8 languages fluently, said Richard, approaching Rashid despite his difficulty walking. If she says you said this, then you did say it. Jessica began to cry, still not able to fully believe. Rashid, tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't say those things. Rashid tried to approach her. Jessica, honey, you have to understand. Don't touch me, shouted Jessica, stepping back. Just answer. Did you or did you not say those things? Rashid's silence was more revealing than any confession. Jessica collapsed into sobs, immediately supported by Emily, who had come running upon hearing the shouts. What happened? Asked Emily, alarmed. What happened is that our dear son-in-law is a con artist, said Richard bitterly. Married your sister to rob our family. Emily looked at Rashid with disbelief. Is this true? At that moment, other guests began to approach, noticing something was wrong. The music stopped, and the hall fell silent, everyone looking at the small group near the main table. Rashid, realizing he could no longer deny it, tried one last strategy. Okay, maybe I said some things in the heat of the moment, but it was just nerves. You know how it is, men say stupid things when they're nervous. Nerves? Margaret approached him, scathing. You called my daughter stupid and easy to manipulate because of nerves. And said you're here for my father's inheritance, added Jessica between sobs. How did you know my father is sick? I never told you that. Rashid realized he had complicated things even further. The truth was, he had investigated the Wilson family before approaching Jessica, discovering about Richard's health condition and the family's assets through contacts he had in the United States. I noticed he was sick when I met him. Lie, said Richard, increasingly outraged. My medical exams are confidential. How did you know the details of my condition? It was then that Mrs. Henderson, the elderly neighbor who had lived in the same building as the Wilson family for over 20 years, approached the group. At 72 years old, she was known for her impeccable memory and for missing nothing that happened in the neighborhood. Sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice firm despite her advanced age, but I need to say something important. Everyone turned to her. Mrs. Henderson looked directly at Rashid. Young man, I remember you. About 3 months ago, you were talking to Frank at the front desk of our building, asking questions about the Wilson family. You asked about their financial situation, about Mr. Richard's health condition, about whether Jessica had other boyfriends. The silence was absolute. Rashid tried to deny it. You must be confusing me with someone else. I'm not confused about anything, my boy, cut off Mrs. Henderson. I'm 72 years old, but my mind is working perfectly. And Frank told me afterward, because he thought it was strange so many questions about a family you didn't even know yet. Jessica raised her tear-streaked face. You investigated me before you even got to know me properly. Jessica, I can explain. Then explain, she shouted with a force that surprised everyone. Explain how you knew about my father's illness. Explain why you were asking questions about our family. Explain why you called me stupid and easy to manipulate. Rashid tried to approach again, but Emily stepped between him and Jessica. Don't come near my sister. It was at that moment that Robert, Jessica, and Emily's brother arrived. At 32 years old, he was a banker and had a more controlled personality than his sisters. But when he saw Jessica crying and sensed the tension in the air, he immediately understood something serious was happening. What's going on here? He asked, looking at everyone seriously. Your brother-in-law is a con artist, summarized Richard without beating around the bush. Robert looked at Rashid with a cold expression. What do you mean, con artist? Margaret quickly explained what she had heard and how the situation had developed. As she spoke, Robert grew increasingly serious. Rashid, said Robert, with a controlled but threatening voice, you have 10 seconds to give me an explanation that makes sense, or I'll have to take some measures. Robert, no violence, said Jessica, still crying. There won't be any violence, Jessica, but he will answer to me. Rashid was visibly desperate. Faisal had discreetly disappeared, leaving him alone to face the Wilson family. He tried once more. Look, maybe I express myself poorly, but you need to understand that I really love Jessica. Lie, shouted Jessica, standing up abruptly. If you loved me, you wouldn't have said you were only here for the inheritance. You wouldn't have called me stupid. You wouldn't have investigated me like I was a target. At that moment, Father Thomas, who had officiated the ceremony and was concerned about the commotion, also arrived. What's going on here, my children? Father, said Margaret with a tired voice. We discovered this man married my daughter with ulterior motives. The priest looked at Rashid with sadness. My son, is this true? Rashid, seeing himself cornered from all sides, finally began to break down. You don't understand. I was in financial trouble. Dangerous people were collecting debts from me. I needed a quick solution. And the solution was to deceive an innocent woman? Asked the priest with disapproval. I didn't want to hurt anyone. It was only temporary. Temporary? Jessica exploded again. You married me as a temporary solution to your problems. Rashid tried to explain. Jessica, I was going to tell you everything later. When things got resolved, after you had robbed our family and left, said Robert, increasingly outraged, it was then that an unexpected guest arrived. Dr. William Spencer, the doctor who had been treating Richard for years, had arrived late to the party because of an emergency at the hospital. "Sorry I'm late," he said, approaching the group. "I hope I didn't miss anything important." "Dr. William," said Richard with a heavy voice, "you arrived at an opportune time." The doctor noticed the tension in the air. "Did something happen?" Margaret explained the situation to the doctor, who grew increasingly outraged as he heard the story. "So you're telling me," said the doctor, looking at Rashid, "that this young man investigated Richard's medical condition to take advantage of the family?" "Exactly," confirmed Jessica, wiping away her tears. Dr. William approached Rashid. "Young man, do you know that investigating private medical information is a crime, and using that information to deceive a family is fraud?" Rashid was growing paler by the minute. "Doctor, I didn't have access to the tests. I just noticed he was sick." "That's a lie," said the doctor. "Nobody notices controlled type 2 diabetes just by looking, and from what I've been told, you knew specific details about his condition." It was at that moment that Mrs. Henderson spoke again. "Doctor, I remember Frank at the front desk mentioned that the young man specifically asked about medications Mr. Richard was taking and about doctor's appointments." The situation was getting worse and worse for Rashid. He realized there was no way to deny or minimize what he had done anymore. "All right," he shouted, finally losing his composure. "All right, I investigated the family before getting close to Jessica, but you don't understand the pressure I was under." "What pressure?" asked Robert, crossing his arms. "I owed money to the wrong people in Cairo. If I didn't pay within 6 months, they were going to do bad things to me and my family back there." Jessica looked at him with a mixture of pain and disbelief. "And you thought the solution was to destroy my life?" "I didn't want to destroy your life. I just needed some time to establish myself here, gain access to some resources." "You wanted to steal from our family," said Emily angrily. "Call things by their proper name." Rashid tried once more. "But I ended up falling in love with you for real, Jessica. At first it was just about interest, but later—" "Stop!" Jessica shouted, covering her ears. "Stop lying! You called me stupid 2 hours ago, said I was easy to manipulate. That's not love." At that moment, Professor Barbara also arrived, an old colleague of Margaret's from the university. At 68 years old, she had been invited to the party and arrived late due to traffic problems. "Margaret, dear," she said, approaching. "Sorry I'm late, but what's going on here?" Margaret sighed, tired of repeating the story. "Barbara, we discovered that Jessica's husband is a con artist." Professor Barbara was known for her sharp mind and life experience. She looked at Rashid carefully. "Con artist how?" "He pretended to be in love with my daughter to get access to our inheritance," explained Richard. Professor Barbara shook her head sadly. "Unfortunately, this is happening more and more. Younger men approaching American women with financial interests." "Have you seen cases like this before?" asked Jessica. "Several, my dear. At the university, we've had lectures about this type of scam. They usually start by investigating the family's financial situation, then pretend to be in love." "That's exactly what happened," confirmed Margaret. Rashid was growing desperate with each person who arrived and confirmed he'd been discovered. "Look, I admit I started wrong, but I swear my feelings changed. Jessica, you have to believe me." "How can I believe you after all this?" asked Jessica, her voice breaking. "How can I trust someone who investigated me like a target, who spoke about me so cruelly, who lied about everything from the beginning?" "Because I changed, because now it's different. Now it's different because you were caught," said Robert coldly. "If my mother didn't know Arabic, you would have continued with your plan." At that moment, Mr. Johnson also arrived, the Wilson family's neighbor for over 15 years. At 75, he was retired and spent a lot of time in the building's lobby, chatting with Frank and watching the comings and goings. "Folks, what's all this commotion?" he asked, approaching with his cane. "Mr. Johnson," said Richard, "remember when I mentioned that Jessica was dating a foreign guy?" I remember. You were happy because she had found someone." "Well, we found out he's a con artist, Mr. Johnson looked at Rashid suspiciously. "A con artist? What kind of con?" "Marriage for financial gain," explained Margaret. Mr. Johnson shook his head. "Son, that's not right. A hard-working girl like Jessica doesn't deserve to be deceived like that. Rashid was becoming more and more isolated. Everyone present was against him, and he could no longer deny what he had done. "Jessica," he tried one last time, "give me a chance to explain properly, in private." "No," she replied, categorically. "I don't want to be alone with you for even a minute. You lied about everything, everything." It was then that Sister Mary arrived, the nun from the parish Jessica had always attended and who had helped organize the ceremony. At 65, she was known for her wisdom and for giving good advice. "My children," she said, sensing the tension. "What's going on?" Father Thomas quickly explained the situation to Sister Mary, who listened with an increasingly serious expression. "Young man," she said, addressing Rashid, "do you understand the gravity of what you've done? Sister, I know I was wrong, but you didn't just deceive an innocent woman. You profaned the sacrament of matrimony. You made false vows before God and this entire community." The nun's words hit Rashid like a slap. Jessica began to cry again, this time not just from sadness, but also from humiliation. "I feel so stupid," she murmured. "How could I have been so blind?" Margaret hugged her tightly. "You're not stupid, my dear. You're a good-hearted person who trusted someone who didn't deserve your trust." "But Mom, all the signs were there. He always avoided talking about his family, about his past, and I ignored everything." "Love makes us blind sometimes," said Professor Barbara affectionately. "It wasn't your fault for trusting someone who lied from day one." Rashid tried once more. "Jessica, please." "No," she shouted, turning to him furiously. "Enough. I don't want to hear another word from you, nothing." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. It was at that moment that Jennifer arrived, Jessica's best friend since childhood. At 29, she was a lawyer and had a strong personality. She was late because she was handling an urgent case at the office. "Jessica," she called, quickly approaching. "Sorry I'm late, but wow, why does everyone look so serious? What happened?" "Jennifer," said Jessica, crying, "I found out my marriage is a sham." Jennifer looked around, confused. "What do you mean, a sham?" Robert quickly explained the situation to Jennifer, who grew more and more outraged as she heard the story. "You're telling me," she said, looking at Rashid with the expression of a lawyer in court, "that this man investigated my friend as a target, lied about his intentions, married her to rob the family, and even spoke about her in a degrading way, thinking no one would understand." "That's right," confirmed Margaret. Jennifer approached Rashid. "Do you know this could constitute several crimes? Fraud, matrimonial fraud, invasion of privacy." Rashid was getting increasingly nervous. "Ma'am, I haven't committed any crimes." "Of course you have," replied Jennifer with professional coolness. "And depending on how you obtained her father's private medical information, it could be an even more serious crime." It was at that moment that Detective Michael Thompson, Richard's distant cousin, also arrived. At 52 years old, he was a detective with the police department and had been invited to the family party. "Cousin Richard," he said, approaching, "sorry I'm late, but there was an incident at the precinct and... wow, what's with everyone's faces?" Richard sighed. "Michael, you came at just the right time. We have a situation here." The detective looked around and immediately realized something serious was happening. "What kind of situation?" Jennifer stepped forward. "Detective, this man married Jessica through fraud. He investigated the family beforehand, lied about his intentions, and confessed he was only interested in the inheritance." Detective Michael looked at Rashid with a professional expression. "Is this true, young man?" Rashid was visibly panicked now that there was a police officer at the party. "Detective, there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," said Margaret firmly. "I heard exactly what he said in Arabic about my daughter." "You speak Arabic?" asked the detective. "Perfectly. I'm a retired linguistics professor." Detective Michael turned to Rashid. "So you confirmed you married with fraudulent intentions?" Rashid tried to deny it, but was clearly nervous. It wasn't exactly like that." Then how was it? Insisted the detective. It was at that moment that Attorney Davis, the Wilson family's lawyer for over 10 years, also arrived. At 60 years old, he was known for his competence and discretion. "Richard," he said, approaching, "I got an urgent message from Jennifer saying you needed legal assistance. What's going on?" Jennifer quickly explained the situation to Attorney Davis, who listened with professional attention. "I see," he said when Jennifer finished. "We have here a classic case of marriage fraud with possible aggravated fraud." "Sir," Rashid tried, desperate, "no crime was committed." "Young man," said Attorney Davis in a firm voice, "investigating a family's private information, including confidential medical data, to marry with fraudulent intentions is indeed a crime, and depending on how you obtained that information, it could be a serious crime." Jessica had been following the whole conversation, still in shock. "So he can really be arrested for this?" "He can," confirmed Jennifer. "Marriage fraud, invasion of privacy, several possible crimes." Rashid was growing desperate. "Look, I can fix this. I can return everything I received. I can annul the marriage." "How generous," said Robert with irony. "Returning what you haven't even had time to steal yet." "Did he receive anything?" asked Attorney Davis. "Not yet," said Richard, "but we had planned to put his name on the bank account after the marriage, and we had already talked about including him in the will." Attorney Davis shook his head. "Good thing you found out before. If he had access to the assets, it would be much more complicated to recover." Rashid tried once more. "Jessica, I swear my feelings for you are real now." "How can I believe you?" she exploded. "You lied about everything. Your name might not even be real." "My name is real. And the rest? Your story, your family, your feelings. What else is a lie?" Rashid hesitated before answering, and that hesitation was more revealing than any confession. "Rashid," said Detective Michael, approaching, "are you in the United States with a legal visa?" Rashid paled even more. I'm on a tourist visa." "A tourist visa doesn't allow for a civil marriage in the United States," said Attorney Davis immediately. "To marry civilly, you would need a permanent visa or residency." Margaret looked at Jessica. "That means that..." "The marriage might not even be legally valid," Jennifer added. Jessica felt a mixture of relief and even more humiliation. "So I'm not even really married?" "Probably not," confirmed Attorney Davis. "We'll need to check the documentation, but if he's in the country only with a tourist visa, the civil marriage has no legal validity." Rashid was becoming completely desperate. "But the religious ceremony..." "The religious ceremony is also annulled when we discover it was based on lies," said Father Thomas with sadness. "You made false vows, my son." At that moment, Dorothy, the housekeeper who had worked for the Wilson family for over 20 years, also arrived. At 58, she was practically a member of the family. "Good heavens," she said, approaching and seeing Jessica crying. "What happened to my girl?" "Dorothy," said Margaret tiredly, "Rashid deceived our Jessica." Dorothy looked at Rashid with an expression that mixed disappointment and anger. "Young man, how did you have the courage to do this to our Jessica? She's a golden girl." "Dorothy, don't give me any excuses," she cut him off. "I saw how happy she was when she met you. She even learned to make Arabic food to please you, and you were deceiving her the whole time." Dorothy's words hit Jessica like a stab. She remembered all the nights she had spent watching YouTube videos to learn Arabic recipes, how she had saved money to buy special spices, how she had tried to understand and accept his culture. "I did all that for you," she murmured, looking at Rashid through her tears. "I tried so hard to make you happy." "Jessica, I learned your recipes, studied your culture, defended you when people questioned if it wasn't too early to marry, and you were deceiving me the whole time." Margaret approached her daughter. "My daughter, you are a wonderful person. Don't let this man make you doubt that." It was at that moment that Mr. Harris, the doorman of the building where the Wilson family lived, also arrived. At 63, he had known the entire family for over 15 years. "Mrs. Margaret," he said, taking off his cap, "you're here. I thought you were at Jessica's party." "We are at the party, Harris," said Richard, "but we had a complicated situation." Mr. Harris looked around and noticed the tension. "Did something happen?" Margaret quickly explained the situation. Mr. Harris shook his head with indignation. I knew there was something strange about that young man. Whenever he came to visit Jessica, he kept asking questions about the family, about everyone's schedules. What kind of questions? Asked Detective Michael. He asked about the medicines Mr. Richard took, about doctors who came to visit, about bank correspondence. I thought it was strange at the time. Rashid was increasingly cornered. Each person who arrived confirmed that he had acted suspiciously. And there's more, continued Mr. Harris. Last week, I saw him talking to some strange men on the corner. They seemed kind of, how can I say, they seemed like loan sharks. Loan sharks? Asked Robert. Yeah, you know, those guys who collect debts. They were speaking seriously with him, and he seemed nervous. This information made Rashid turn even paler. Jessica looked at him. So it was true? You really owed money to dangerous people? Rashid hesitated before answering. Jessica, the situation is complicated. Answer just yes or no. Do you owe money to dangerous people? Yes. And you put us in danger because of that? Rashid couldn't answer. The answer was clear in his silence. Jessica turned to the family. So besides deceiving me, he also brought danger to our home. It appears so, said Detective Michael, increasingly serious. Rashid, do these people you owe money to know where you are? They know I'm in the United States. Do they know where you live, where our family lives? Asked Richard, alarmed. Faisal didn't answer, but his expression confirmed the family's worst fears. My God, murmured Jessica, he not only deceived me but put all of us in danger. Jennifer approached Faisal. How many people know about this family's existence and the address where they live? I can't talk about that. Of course you can, shouted Robert, losing his patience. You've put our family at risk. We have the right to know the level of danger. Detective Michael positioned himself next to Robert. Faisal, you need to cooperate now. If there are dangerous people involved, we need to take protective measures for this family. Faisal was visibly panicked. If I talk, they'll find me. And if you don't talk, they might hurt innocent people, replied the detective firmly. At that moment, James, Margaret's older brother, also arrived. At 65 years old, he was retired from the Navy and had a military bearing that commanded respect. Margaret, he said, approaching with a firm step, I got a call from Emily saying there was an emergency here. What's going on? Margaret sighed, tired of explaining the situation repeatedly. James, we found out that Faisal is a con artist who married Jessica for financial gain. James looked at Faisal with an expression that made the young man instinctively step back. Is that true, boy? Sir, the situation is more complicated than it seems. The situation is quite simple, said James with a firm voice. Did you deceive my niece or not? Faisal tried to explain. Mr. James, I was in trouble. I didn't ask about your troubles. I asked if you deceived my niece. Yes. And you owe money to dangerous people who might threaten my family. Faisal hesitated. Possibly. James turned to Detective Michael. Michael, what measures can we take to protect the family? First, we need more information about these people he owes money to, replied the detective. And then, we might need to file a police report and take some preventive measures. Jessica was listening to everything in shock. I can't believe this is happening. An hour ago, I was getting married, thinking it was the happiest day of my life. Jessica, said Sister Mary, approaching kindly. Sometimes God allows us to discover the truth at the right moment, to protect us from worse things. But sister, why did it have to be this way? Why on my wedding day? Because if you had found out later, the damage would have been much greater, replied Professor Barbara. Imagine if you had children with him, if he had full access to the family's assets. Jessica began to understand that despite the pain, it had been lucky to discover the truth when she did. At that moment, Faisal tried once more. Jessica, please listen to me. I know I started wrong, but my feelings changed. I really fell in love with you. Faisal, she said with a tired voice, even if that were true, how can I trust you after all this? How can I build a life with someone who started our relationship with a lie? People can change. They can, agreed Jessica. But change takes time, and trust also rebuilds with time, and I have neither the time nor the energy for that. Jennifer approached Jessica. Jessica, do you want us to take any legal action against him? Jessica looked at Faisal, who seemed smaller and more pathetic by the minute. I just want him out of my life, forever. But Jessica, said Attorney Davis, you need to formalize the annulment of the marriage, even if it's not legally valid. Do whatever is necessary, she replied. I just want to be rid of all this. Rashid tried once more. Jessica, please. Enough, she shouted with a force that surprised everyone. I don't want to hear another word from you, not one. You destroyed what should have been the happiest day of my life. You deceived me, humiliated me, put my family in danger. Enough. The silence that followed was absolute. Rashid finally realized there was nothing left to say or do. Detective Michael approached him. Rashid, you'll have to come with me to provide some information about these people you owe money to. It's a matter of public safety. And then, asked Rashid in a defeated voice, then you'll have to leave the country or regularize your status, but far from this family. Rashid looked one last time at Jessica, who avoided his eyes. Then he looked at the entire family gathered against him, all the friends, all the neighbors who condemned him. I'm sorry, he murmured. We're sorry too, replied Margaret. Sorry that our daughter wasted her time with someone like you. Rashid left accompanied by the detective, leaving behind a heavy silence in the banquet hall. Jessica collapsed into a chair, still wearing the wedding dress that now felt like a dead weight on her shoulders. I feel so humiliated. You have nothing to feel humiliated about, said Richard, approaching with difficulty. You were the victim of a professional con man. But Dad, all the signs were there. How could I have been so blind? Because you truly love, answered Margaret, hugging her daughter. And when we truly love, we trust. The problem isn't that you trusted. The problem is that he abused that trust. Jessica began to cry again, but this time they weren't just tears of sadness. There was also relief. Mom, thank you for speaking Arabic. Thank you for saving me. I would do anything to protect you, replied Margaret, squeezing her daughter tighter. Robert approached. Jessica, we'll take care of everything now. You don't need to worry about a thing. And we'll be here for you, added Emily, for whatever you need. Jennifer took Jessica's hands. My friend, I know it hurts now, but you just got rid of an unhappy life. Imagine if you had discovered this 5 years from now with children, with a whole life built on lies. Jessica nodded, beginning to understand that it had been terrible luck, but luck nonetheless. Father Thomas approached. Jessica, my child, I know this is painful now, but believe that God has better plans for you. Father, how can I ever trust anyone again after this? Slowly, he answered wisely. But don't let one person's wickedness destroy your ability to love. The world has good people waiting to meet someone special like you. Sister Mary approached too. Jessica, you're a nurse. You dedicate your life to caring for others. That shows the size of your heart. Don't let a bad man change that in you. Jessica looked around and saw all those people who truly loved her. Her family, her friends, her neighbors, all there to support her in her most difficult moment. Do you think I'll be able to get over this? Of course you will, said Professor Barbara. You're stronger than you think, and you have a wonderful family to support you. And friends who love you, added Jennifer. And a whole community rooting for you, said Mrs. Henderson affectionately. Jessica rose from the chair and looked at her wedding dress. I want to take this dress off. I don't want to look at it anymore. Let's go home, said Margaret. Emily, help your sister change. As Jessica left to change, the other guests began talking among themselves about what had happened. Poor girl, commented Mrs. Jenkins. But it was a blessing to find out before it was too late. True, agreed Mr. Johnson. Imagine the damage that man could have done. What matters is that the family is united, said James, and now we'll make sure she recovers from this situation. 15 minutes later, Jessica came back wearing simple clothes. She had washed her face and combed her hair, but her eyes were still red from crying so much. "I already feel better," she said, forcing a smile. "Let's go home," said Richard. "Today was a very heavy day for everyone." "And tomorrow?" asked Jessica. "What will tomorrow be like?" "Tomorrow will be a new day," answered Margaret, "and we'll be here to help you rebuild your life." "No lies this time," added Robert. "No con artists," said Emily. "Only with people who truly love you," finished Jennifer. Jessica looked at all those dear people, and for the first time since she had discovered the truth about Rashid, felt a glimmer of hope. "You know what's strange?" she said. "I feel free, scared, hurt, humiliated, either, but free." "Because you are free," said Sister Mary. "Free from a life based on lies. And now you can build a life based on truth," added Father Thomas. Jessica took a deep breath. "Let's go home then. Let's start over." The Wilson family left the party hall that night, not as they had planned, as a family celebrating a wedding, but as a family that had discovered themselves even more united in the face of adversity. 3 months later, Jessica was working her shift at the hospital when she received a call from Jennifer. "Jessica, I have news about Rashid." "What happened?" "He was deported. Detective Michael managed to prove he was in the country illegally and involved in fraudulent activities." Jessica felt immense relief. "And the people he owed money to?" "From what we heard, he reached an agreement before leaving the country. Apparently his family in Egypt paid the debts to avoid bigger problems." "That's good, at least we won't have any more trouble with that." "Jessica, how are you feeling?" Jessica looked out the hospital window, seeing life going on as usual on the street. "You know, Jennifer, I'm fine, really fine. At first it was very difficult, but now I realize I got rid of a lifetime of suffering." "And your heart? Is it opening up to new possibilities yet?" Jessica smiled, slowly, "But I'm learning to trust my intuition again. And most importantly, I'm learning to value the people who truly love me. Like your family. Especially my mother. If it weren't for her, your mother is a hero. She really is. Those 40 years studying languages saved my life." That afternoon, when Jessica got home, she found Margaret in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Mom, Jennifer called me. Rashid was deported." Margaret stopped cooking and hugged her daughter. What a relief. "Now you can move forward without worry." "Mom, I never properly thanked you for what you did for me." "Honey, any mother would do the same." "No, Mom. Any mother would try to protect her daughter, but not every mother would have the courage to destroy her daughter's dreams to save her from an unhappy life." Margaret held Jessica's face tenderly. "Jessica, you deserve a truly happy life, with someone who truly loves you, who respects you, who builds an honest life with you. I know that now, and when that someone appears, I'll know how to recognize them." "How?" Jessica smiled. "Because now I know the difference between someone who investigates me like a target and someone who knows me as a person. Between someone who sees me as an opportunity and someone who sees me as a partner." Margaret smiled, proud of the maturity her daughter had developed. "And you know your family will always be here to support you in any decision." "I know. And I also know that if I ever bring someone home, you'll be watching every detail," Jessica laughed. "Especially if he speaks a foreign language." Margaret laughed too, especially that. That evening, the Wilson family had dinner together, as they had every night since the wedding incident. They had become even more united, even closer. "Jessica," said Richard, who had been noticeably better in health these past few months, "have you thought about taking that specialization course you wanted?" "I have, Dad. In fact, I've already enrolled." "Really?" asked Emily excitedly. "Really? I'm going to specialize in the ICU. It's always been my dream." "That's great," said Robert. "And when does it start?" "Next month. It's a 2-year course, but it'll be worth it." Margaret smiled. "I'm proud of you, my daughter." "Why?" "Because you turned a terrible experience into strength to grow." Jessica looked at the family gathered around the table, at the people who truly loved her, and realized that maybe that terrible wedding day had actually been the first day of her real life. "You know what I've discovered?" she said. "What?" everyone asked, curious. "That true love, isn't just between sweethearts or couples. True love is this right here. It's family that protects you, friends who support you, people who want what's best for you without wanting anything in return. That's true, agreed Emily. And when romantic love comes, Jessica continued, it'll be to add to this, not to replace it. Exactly, said Margaret. And when it comes, it'll be with someone who respects and values this family love you have. Jessica nodded. And if I ever get married again, it'll be right here, at home, with you all. No banquet hall, just family and true friends. And if the groom speaks a foreign language, joked Robert, Mum will be keeping an eye out. Everyone laughed, including Margaret. You can count on that. 6 months later, Jessica was finishing her first semester of her specialization when she met Dr. Daniel Miller, a 32-year-old American doctor who worked in the same ICU where she was interning. Unlike Rashid, Daniel was completely transparent about his life. He talked about his family from day one, introduced Jessica to his friends as early as the second week, and always answered any questions she had about his past or his plans. Jessica, he said one day, after 2 months of knowing each other, can I ask you a personal question? Sure. Have you always been so cautious with relationships? Jessica hesitated before answering. Actually, no. I had a bad experience in the past. I found out the person I was going to marry was deceiving me. Wow, I'm so sorry. That must have been terrible. It was. But it taught me a lot about what to look for in a person, and what you look for. Honesty, transparency, someone who isn't afraid to introduce me to their family, to talk about the past, to build plans together openly. Daniel smiled. Then I think we're on the right track. Want to meet my family this weekend? Jessica smiled too. I'd love to. But first, I want you to meet mine. Perfect. That weekend, Daniel went to dinner at the Wilson family home. During dinner, Margaret observed every detail of his behavior, every word, every reaction. After dinner, when Daniel offered to help wash the dishes, Margaret took the opportunity to talk to him alone in the kitchen. Daniel, can I ask you a direct question? Of course, Mrs. Wilson. What are your intentions with my daughter? Daniel stopped drying the plate and looked directly at Margaret. Mrs. Wilson, I like Jessica very much. We're still getting to know each other, but so far everything I've discovered about her makes me want to know more. She's smart, hardworking, caring with her family. They're qualities I really admire. And financially? How do you see this issue? Each with their own responsibilities. I believe in an equal partnership, where each contributes what they can and decisions are made together. Margaret continued testing. And if you were to get married one day, what would the relationship with our family be like? I hope it would be one of respect and affection. Family is very important to Jessica, so it would be important to me too. Margaret smiled, approving the answers. One more question. Do you speak any foreign languages? Daniel laughed. I speak English and a little Spanish. Why? Just curiosity, said Margaret, laughing too. When they returned to the living room, Jessica noticed that her mother was more relaxed. Everything okay in the kitchen? Everything's great, replied Daniel. Your mother asked me some very good questions. What kind of questions? Jessica wanted to know. Questions that a concerned mother asks, said Margaret, and he answered everything very well. Jessica looked at Daniel affectionately. My family is quite protective. And they're right to be, he replied. A family that worries is a family that loves. Richard, who was observing the conversation, approached. Daniel, can I talk with you for a minute? Of course, Mr. Richard. The two went out to the porch. Richard, now in much better health, spoke sincerely. Daniel, my daughter went through a very difficult situation. She was deceived by someone who took advantage of her. She told me, I'm very sorry she went through that. That's why we're very careful now. Any sign of lying or financial interest, and you won't be welcome here. Daniel looked at Richard seriously. Mr. Richard, I understand completely, and I assure you I have no interest beyond getting to know your daughter better. She can support herself, I can support myself, and if one day we build something together, it will be because we want to be together, not out of necessity. And your family? Do they know about Jessica? Yes, they do. In fact, my mother is eager to meet her. Richard nodded, satisfied. All right, but know that we now have a linguistics professor in the house who speaks 8 languages. So, watch what you say. Daniel laughed. Noted, but since I only speak Portuguese, English, and Spanish, I think I'm safe. When they went back inside, Jessica noticed that her father had also approved of Daniel. Everything okay? Everything's great, said Richard. Daniel is a serious young man. A year later, Daniel and Jessica were seriously dating. The relationship had progressed naturally, transparently, with both families involved and approving. Jessica, said Daniel one day after a shift at the hospital, have you thought about living together? Yes, I have, but not now. I want to finish my specialization first. Perfect. I also prefer to wait. I want it to be at the right time for the right reason. And when it is, it will be different from everything I've experienced before, said Jessica. How so? It will be based on truth, on real knowledge of each other, on plans built together. Daniel hugged her. That's exactly how I want it to be. 2 years later, Jessica had graduated as an ICU specialist and was working at her dream hospital. Daniel had received a promotion and was coordinating a medical team. Jessica, he said one day at the Wilson family's house after dinner, I have a question to ask. The whole family stopped to listen. Daniel knelt in front of Jessica. Jessica Wilson, will you marry me? Jessica looked at him, then at the family, all smiling and rooting for her. She thought about everything she had been through, everything she had learned, how different it was to be with someone who truly loved her. Yes, she answered, crying with joy. Yes, I will. The whole family celebrated. Margaret hugged Jessica. This time it's real love, my daughter. Yes, it is, Mom, and thank you for teaching me the difference. Thank you for trusting me when you needed to. 6 months later, Jessica and Daniel got married in the backyard of the Wilson family home, a simple ceremony with only family and close friends. Jessica wore a simple dress, Daniel a navy blue suit, and both were radiant with happiness. During the ceremony, Father Thomas spoke about true love, about trust, about building a life based on honesty and mutual respect. Daniel and Jessica, he said, you have come here not just as 2 passionate individuals, but as 2 people who have learned the value of truth in a relationship. When it was time for the vows, Jessica spoke with emotion. Daniel, I promise to be your companion in all truth, to build our life based on honesty, and to cherish every day by your side as the gift that it is. Daniel replied, Jessica, I promise to always respect you, to be transparent in everything, and to build with you a life where trust is our strongest foundation. When they kissed, sealing their union, the whole family celebrated knowing that this time it was real, it was true, it was forever. At the small but love-filled reception, Margaret approached Jessica. How do you feel? Complete, Mom. For the first time in my life, I feel complete. And with good reason. You built this relationship the right way. Jessica looked around, seeing Daniel talking animatedly with Robert about football, seeing Emily teaching the new sister-in-law how to dance, seeing Richard, fully recovered, telling stories to his friends. You know what's funny, Mom? What? If it weren't for that terrible day 3 years ago, I would never have learned to value what I have now. Sometimes the worst experiences prepare us for the best, Margaret agreed. And if it weren't for you speaking Arabic, life has these coincidences, doesn't it? It wasn't a coincidence, Mom. It was providence. Margaret smiled. 40 years studying languages to save my daughter in one day. Every lesson was worth it. Jessica hugged her mother. Thank you for everything, Mom. For protecting me, for teaching me, for always being here. Thank you for trusting me when you needed to. That night, as the reception went on in the backyard, Jessica looked at her new life and realized she had found something she didn't even know she was looking for. Peace. Peace in being with someone who truly loved her. Peace in having a family that protected her. Peace in having learned the difference between true love and disguised self-interest. Daniel approached. "What are you thinking about, wife?" "About how interesting life is. Sometimes we need to go through the worst to get to the best. And do you think we've reached the best?" Jessica looked at him, at the family, at the friends, at the life they had built together based on truth. "I'm sure of it." And that night, as they danced in the backyard of the house where Jessica had grown up, she finally understood that she had found her place in the world, in the arms of someone who truly loved her, surrounded by a family that would always be there to protect her, and with the wisdom needed to never again be deceived by someone who didn't deserve her love. End of story. And you? What did you think of this story of overcoming and family? Did Jessica make the right decision by trusting her mother? Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most, and if you have any similar story to share. Your like and subscription to the channel help us a lot to continue bringing these touching stories to you.